You know that moment when you step into a space and suddenly feel drained before a single word is exchanged. Most people brush past it, but people with genuine empathic sensitivity, they can't ignore it because their minds are constantly scanning emotional frequencies without conscious effort. Neuroscience has a name for this: heightened emotional mirroring. It's the brain's natural response to synchronize with the emotional force around it through advanced neural systems. And this creates some genuinely called mirror neuron activity. And this creates some genuinely strange behavioral patterns, not the Instagram version. Not "I'm an empath because movies make me cry" behavior, real behavior. The kind that silently fractures connections, preserves survival instincts, and fundamentally reorganizes how one moves through existence. Here are 7 things genuinely sensitive people do that only they vanish is without explanation as, not explanation, not from dislike. From neurological overload. A truly sensitive person can spend 2 hours in an emotionally turbulent environment and feel like they are processing everything, their micro expressions, forced enthusiasm, underlying tension, concealed frustration, unspoken resentment, manufactured confidence. Most sensitive individuals absorb them completely. Psychology research confirms this. Highly attuned individuals show increased activation in brain regions linked to emotional processing and social awareness. Their brains aren't just observing emotion, they're experiencing it in real time. That's why genuine sensitive people suddenly go offline, stop answering messages, retreat from social plans, or disappear for extended periods. They're not being dramatic, they're undergoing neurological recovery. And the painful part? Most feel ashamed for needing it, so they push themselves to stay engaged longer than they should. Stop viewing recovery as most never learn. Athletes rebuild after physical exertion. Athletes rebuild after physical exertion. Sensitive people rebuild after emotional exposure. If you operate this way, isolation isn't avoidance. Number 2, they instantly detect when someone is inauthentic. People usually can't articulate how they know. They just do. A smile held slightly too long. Eyes that disconnect from speech. The energy feels off. Behavioral science outside of words. This human connection exists primarily outside of words. Vocal patterns, facial micromovements, timing, pupil shifts, throat tension, facial asymmetries. The brain of individuals gather all of this data simultaneously and are all of this data simultaneously. That's why inauthentic people register as physically uncomfortable to them. Here's where it gets risky. Sensitive people often override their instincts to avoid seeming critical. Critical mistake. Some of the world's most cunning manipulators survive precisely because kind people suppress their gut responses in favor of politeness. Sensitive people need to understand this. Your discomfort is information. Not every uneasy feeling signals danger, but dismissing every uneasy feeling creates danger. Number 3, they absorb emotional weight that isn't theirs. This is among the strangest phenomena sensitive people report. Waking up feeling someone nearby is struggling. Suddenly feeling heavy after a conversation with one person specifically. Entering a room upbeat, only to feel depleted within minutes around negativity. Psychological research refers to this as emotional synchronization, the automatic alignment of feelings between vulnerable, particularly around chronic negative people. It's actually chronic becomes narcissistic personalities, emotionally volatile individuals, or trauma-affected personalities. Their brains don't just hear emotion, they internally rehearse it. This means many people spend years carrying psychological pain that was never theirs to carry. Eventually, the eruption mental fog begins sending distress signals, sleep disruption, anxiety spirals, emotional flatness, persistent tiredness, reduced drive, compulsive people-pleasing. This is exactly why boundaries aren't personality traits for sensitive people. They're survival essentials. You don't need to resent someone to restrict their access to your energy. That understanding rewires everything. They mentally replay interactions for extended periods. People assume sensitive individuals are simply emotional. So many are actually hyperanalytical. Empathy generate heightened recognition. They process tone fluctuations, facial shifts, specific words, pauses, contradictions. Afterward, the brain keeps circling back. What did they actually mean? This is why anxiety often follows them. Their awareness doesn't have an off switch. Ironically, this makes them extraordinary at understanding others, but terrible at extending that same understanding to themselves. The answer is learning mental boundaries. Not every feeling requires unpacking. Not a slash means rejection. Not every expression involves you. Mature, sensitive people master observation without attachment. This single skill protects mental health more than almost anything else. Number 5, they become exhausted in crowded spaces even when nothing negative occurs. This confuses people. How does simply being near others create fatigue? Because crowds generate sensory overload. Noise intensity, constant movement, emotional unpredictability, ongoing social monitoring, constant energy shifts. The sensitive person's brain tracks everything continuously. Research on highly attuned individuals suggests they absorb environmental information more completely than others. This means crowded settings aren't just busy, they feel invasive. That's why authentic, sensitive people gravitate toward calm environments over parties, natural settings over cities, intimate conversations over group dynamics. This doesn't automatically mean introversion either. Some sensitive people are socially gifted and magnetic. They just need serious recovery time afterward. Pay close attention to this. Your surroundings directly influence your mental state. Protect your environment and clarity improves dramatically. Number 6, they become targets for emotionally wounded individuals. It happens consistently. Why? Because hurting people sense safety with empathy. Sensitive individuals listen completely. They validate pain. They grasp suffering quickly. But this creates a destructive cycle. Sensitive people become emotional recovery centers for broken individuals. Eventually they confuse being essential with being cherished. That single confusion destroys lives because sensitive people often remain in relationships it cannot. Compassion can fix harm. Recognizing someone's suffering doesn't justify their behavior, and emotionally intelligent predators understand exactly how to exploit a sensitive person's compassion. Number 7, exhaustion comes not conversations or conflict. A genuine sensitive person can walk into emotionally devastated without knowing why. While others hear words, the sensitive nervous system hears what lives underneath them. The anxiety masked by confidence, the sadness concealed in a gaze, the shame hiding inside composure, the rage disguised as laughter. And evidence suggests this isn't imagination. Researchers examining emotional synchronization found that humans unconsciously align emotional states with their surroundings. Heart rhythms shift. Facial muscles mirror automatically. Stress chemicals rise simply from witnessing someone else's anxiety. In other words, emotions propagate through groups like invisible pathogens, but sensitive people experience this at completely different intensity. Their brains process emotional data more completely, more rapidly, and for extended periods. Some researchers believe highly heightened activity in neural systems linked to attention, empathy, and emotional interpretation. The sensitive brain isn't simply observing emotion, it's internally recreating it. Imagine carrying every room's emotional weight without understanding it's happening. That's many sensitive people's daily reality. The terrifying part often originates in childhood. Many genuine sensitive individuals grew up in emotionally unstable relations where they had to become hyper-vigilant just to feel secure. They deciphered vocal pattern. Vocal codes, facial shifts became threat assessments. Quiet moments signaled danger. Emotional tension became something their nervous system monitored automatically. Over time, their brains rewired for emotional detection. But survival mechanisms have costs. The sensitive person eventually loses ability to distinguish their own feelings from everyone else's. This explains why sensitive people suddenly feel anxious without clear reason. They absorb stress from offices, romantic relationships, groups, family systems, even random people. One emotionally unstable person can completely shift a sensitive person's entire nervous system within minutes, and their body pays the price. Sustained emotional strain elevates cortisol. Elevated cortisol connects to sleep fragmentation, compromised immunity, digestive dysfunction, migraines, anxiety conditions. cognitive issues, inflammation, and potentially accelerated aging. Consider this. A sensitive person constantly surrounded by negativity isn't just experiencing emotion. Their body is chemically absorbing toxins. This clarifies why sensitive people feel exhausted after social time. Even when nothing went wrong, they entered fine. But after hours of emotional tracking, unconscious analysis, and nervous system synchronization, their brain begins. It's neurological, isn't weakness. It's neurological exhaustion. Yet society penalizes sensitive people constantly. They get labeled dramatic, delicate, withdrawn, but most aren't trying to disconnect. They're trying to restore themselves from overstimulation. Many sensitive people disappear suddenly. They stop texting, avoid groups, cancel commitments, isolate for days. From outside, it seems inexplicable. But inside, their nervous system is screaming for silence because the sensitive basic exchanges involve simultaneous processing, vocal tension, eye, eye movement, emotional contradictions, buried anger, buried artificial enthusiasm, masked pain. Their awareness functions in multiple layers most people never recognize. That constant work burns enormous energy. Research on highly attuned people suggests they absorb sensory input more thoroughly than average. Sounds feel sharper. Arguments feel heavier. Emotional discomfort feels invasive. Their systems react intensely to environments others overlook completely. This is why crowded environments drain sensitive people rapidly. Shopping districts, family dinners, loud venues, workplaces filled with tension. Ordinary for most people, potentially unbearable for sensitive individuals. Here's where it becomes dangerous. They stay perpetually available limits. Workplace, this people terrible available. They become emotion managers, support systems for fractured people. They absorb hurt, trying to shield others from it. But the body remember everything. Eventually, sleep warnings appear. Sleep disorders, mental cloudiness, panic episodes, emotional flatness, unrelenting fatigue, depleted motivation. Many sensitive people don't recognize the cause because they've constructed their entire existence around managing others' emotional states and sensitive above their own. This creates one of the darkest patterns in sensitive psychology. Addiction to crisis mode. Chaos thinking becomes normal. Emotional depletion becomes normal. Tranquility actually becomes uncomfortable because their nervous system itself to anticipate emotional threats continuously. That's why healing for sensitive people isn't about positive thinking. That's kind fee, deep. It demands nervous system rehabilitation. Genuine healing, quiet spaces, strict environments, outdoor exposure, measured from destructive environments, Stockley psychological separation. These aren't optional for sensitive people. They're biological requirements. One of the deepest lessons sensitive people learn. Not all feelings you experience belong to you. That insight transforms existence. Once sensitive people grasp emotional absorption, they stop condemning themselves for sudden mood shifts. They stop feeling guilty for demanding solitude. They stop forcing themselves into spaces that damage their clarity. And something remarkable happens when they finally shield their energy. Their anxiety diminishes, their emotional awareness transforms into advantage instead of liability. The sensitive capacity was never the actual problem. A healthy, sensitive person becomes extraordinarily powerful. They read people precisely, identify manipulation early, establish deep trust, understand human behavior at depths, most never manipulation, and genuine sensitivity creates belonging without exploitation. That's uncommon, but it only appears when the sensitive person learns a difficult truth. You cannot save everyone without destroying yourself. Many learn this lesson through painful experience. Some sacrifice relationships attempting to rescue broken people. Some sacrifice their health absorbing everyone else's emotional turmoil. Some withdraw emotionally because overwhelm becomes unbearable. But the strongest sensitive people eventually realize something revolutionary. Sensitivity isn't weakness. Unguarded sensitivity is weakness. There's a crucial distinction. Once a sensitive person develops emotional discipline, their awareness becomes nearly superhuman. They recognize deception faster, sense danger earlier, comprehend pain deeper, and identify emotional patterns long before others notice. What once devastated them becomes perception. And perception in the current world represents one of the most uncommon forms of power accessible to humans. The genuine danger of sensitivity isn't feeling too deeply, it's offering too much. Most sensitive people aren't broken by cruelty. They're broken by commitment to people who never deserved their access in the first place. Because authentic sensitive individuals carry a psychological internally, but becomes catastrophic internally. They instinctively resolve suffering, stabilize all pain, attempt to resolve suffering, stabilize conflict, and restore fractured people. Their default is compassion. Their reflex is empathy. And because of this, they frequently become psychological shelters for the injured, the cunning, and the unstable. Initially, it feels meaningful. The sensitive person feels valued, essential, important. But there's a dark psychological reality most sensitive people learn too late. Being essential isn't identical to being loved. And certain people will drain a sensitive person for years while labeling it partnership. Research in psychology confirms this tendency. Studies show that highly empathetic individuals experience stronger emotional reactions around others' suffering. Their brains activate rapidly in response to pain, triggering areas associated with emotional processing and social awareness. Simplified. Sensitive people don't merely comprehend pain mentally. That's where boundaries crumble. That's where boundaries crumble. Once someone's suffering enters the sensitive person's nervous system, they feel driven to fix it. They listen excessively, offer too much, sacrifice beyond reason, over-explain constantly. They permit disrespect because they notice the wounded person underneath destructive behavior. This creates the perfect vulnerability for exploiters. Narcissistic, chaotic individuals, perpetual victims, and dominating people are often magnetically pulled toward sensitive people for one terrifying reason. Sensitive people continue giving even after relationships turn corrosive. A manipulator sees boundaries as challenges. A sensitive person sees boundaries as betrayal. That single difference rewrites entire existence early. That affection required emotional service. They became conflict resolvers in chaotic families, emotion managers for overwhelmed parents, hyper-aware kids who learn to silence their own needs to maintain stability around them. Over time, this creates a subconscious pattern. If I help enough, love will remain. Maturity exposes the devastating consequences. Sensitive people frequently enter imbalanced sensitive partners. They assume emotional, enteral responsibilities never theirs. They forgive harm because they recognize wounding. They pardon repeatedly because they envision transformation. They tolerate disrespect. Trusting compassion will eventually resolve another person's internal damage. But psychology reveals something agonizing. Recognizing someone's suffering doesn't shield you from their destruction. A person can be injured and still devastate your stability. A person can be hurting and still manipulate you. A person can grieve and still deceive you. Yet sensitive people struggle with this because of overrides self-preservation instinct. This is exactly why boundaries aren't self-centered for sensitive people. They're survival mechanisms. Without them, the sensitive producing elevated perpetual stress across extended periods. Chronic stress correlates with immune breakdown, anxiety conditions, depression, stomach problems, sleep disruption. Research suggests sustained emotional strain may even accelerate aging itself. Consider this. A sensitive person in continuous negativity body is absorbing toxins, and sensitive people frequently remain in these situations far longer than others. Why? Because they conflate suffering with devotion. But enduring emotional pain isn't evidence of commitment. Sometimes it proves you betrayed yourself. This is why numerous sensitive people wake up one day emotionally numb. They no longer recognize their own identity. They feel drained by people they once cherished. They become irritable, detached, anxious, mentally foggy. Not because affection evaporated, because their nervous system finally entered survival shutdown. And many sensitive people feel guilty for developing distance from destructive people. They worry they'll appear cold. They fear causing hurt. They convince themselves they're overreacting. Meanwhile, their body continues absorbing damage like poison. That guilt becomes lethal because exploiters often weaponize sensitivity directly. They deploy language like, "You're the only person who truly comprehends me. I depend on you. Nobody else understands. You're abandoning me. If you leave, I'll shatter." And the sensitive person stays. Not from weakness, because their nervous system was shaped to equate self-denial with relational value. But eventually, reality catches up. No volume of devotion fixes someone refusing responsibility. That realization changes everything because authentic sensitivity was never meant to require self-obliteration. Real compassion demands wisdom, and wisdom recognizes limits. A mature, sensitive person learns that maintaining peace surpasses rescuing disorder. They stop absorbing responsibilities to people determined to cross them. They stop absorbing a responsibility for emotions they didn't generate. They stop assuming kindness requires sacrificing stability. And this transformation startles people, especially destructive ones. Because once a sensitive person establishes firm limits, manipulative individuals lose their psychological control. The sensitive person who previously permitted everything becomes unreachable to toxicity. People often interpret this as coldness, but it's clarity. One of the most transformative realizations a sensitive person experiences is distinguishing between empathy and emotional absorption. Empathy means I comprehend your pain. Emotional absorption means your pain is my responsibility. That second pattern destroys existence because humans cannot indefinitely carry everyone's emotional weight. The nervous system cannot sustain perpetual emotional strain without consequences. Studies demonstrate that sustained interpersonal stress increases this anxiety sensitivities and contributes to emotional breakdown, improve far more than relationships. They improve biology, sleep quality, stress reduction, mental sharpness, energy balance. Suddenly, the sensitive person recognizes something almost unbelievable. Tranquility feels foreign because disruption became their baseline. That realization wounds, but also liberates. Because the strongest sensitive people aren't those who save everyone. They're those who ultimately learn to save themselves too. When that occurs, something extraordinary transforms. Instead of being emotionally consumed by everything, the sensitive person becomes emotionally intelligent without collapsing. They can intimacy without abandoning themselves. They can care foul the exploitation without abandoning themselves. They can love intensely without destroying their stability. That's genuine emotional intelligence, not endless. Tolerance, not recognizing compassion as devotion. The true intelligence means recognizing when compassion becomes self-harm. And the moment a sensitive person understands that, their entire existence transforms. Because boundaries don't obstruct love. Boundaries don't diminish connection. They trustworthy people. They strengthen it with trustworthy people. The world teaches sensitive people that their capacity is a deficiency. Too responsive, too affected, too influenced by everything. But history suggests something different. Qualities creating struggle in chaotic spaces are frequently the same qualities generating extraordinary awareness once developed correctly. Because sensitivity without direction feels like torment. But sensitivity with discipline becomes perception, and perception transforms reality. Most people traverse existence partially awake. They hear language but misread contradiction. They observe smiles but ignore internal contradiction. They register conduct but fail to identify underlying patterns. Sensitive people differ. They notice the pause before answering, the melancholy concealed in humor, exhaustion behind artificial brightness. Their brains continuously process emotional data beneath standard conversation. And science indicates this ability functions. Research examining highly attuned individuals reveals heightened responsiveness to emotional and social information. Some researchers believe specific individuals process emotional because of heightened activity in neural systems connected to attention, empathy, and social interpretation straightforwardly, dimensionally reversible. The sensitive brain absorbs more. But early in development, this capacity typically feels like a burden before it feels like a gift. Children with heightened emotional responsiveness typically experience overwhelm before discovering power. Loud atmospheres feel threatening. Emotional turbulence feels physically painful. exclusion resonates longer. Disorder becomes emotionally unbearable. And since contemporary culture prizes emotional suppression instead of emotional development, many sensitive people spend years believing something wasn't the actual issue them. But what if sensitivity wasn't the actual issue? What if living without proper emotional training was the actual problem? Because uncontrolled responsiveness generate wisdom. That they transform difference, transforms lives. Most sensitive people commence their journey emotionally overwhelmed. They absorb tension from surroundings. They struggle with boundaries. They deplete in groups. They process conversations for extended periods. Their nervous system perpetually monitors for emotional threat. But over time, some sensitive people learn some powerful awareness can be directed instead of drowning in emotional on information. They start organizing it, observing instead of absorbing, analyzing instead of reacting. And suddenly, the identical nervous system that once overwhelmed them, they start recognizing deception rapidly. Naception, not through psychic ability, because appear across consistently in millisimotion. Vocal patterns, faces in milliseconds. Transform when people feel vulnerable, insecure, dishonest, uncomfortable, or emotionally distant. Behavioral psychology repeatedly demonstrates that most people recognize it or not. Most people overlook these indicators. Sensitive people frequently don't. That's why advanced sensitive people often cultivate remarkable instinct about people. Exploitation before proof emerges. They detect emotional instability early. They recognize concealed resentment, falsehood, insecurity, or psychological pain long before others register it. And this creates an unusual understand profound. Many genuine asp emotional profoundly. They often grasp emotional truth before they can logically demonstrate it. Initially, this can feel confusing, even unsettling, because society teaches distrust of instinct without immediate evidence. But the sensitive brain constantly gathers thousands of subconscious behavioral details, minor inconsistencies, facial strain, energy shifts, tone variations, gaze patterns, pacing, pauses, and progressively, the brain constructs emotional recognition from recurring exposure. This isn't supernatural, it's sophisticated observation operating below conscious awareness. The challenge: many sensitive people spend years disregarding these instincts to seem non judgmental. That mistake becomes costly because perceiving emotional danger early represents one of the most powerful survival advantages available. Studies on intuition and unconscious recognition suggest the brain frequently identifies threats before conscious reasoning catches up. That uncomfortable sensation, sensitive people experience it's pattern recognition functioning beneath the instincts. When sensitive people finally learn to value healthy instinct, their entire life transforms. They choose partnerships more deliberately, escape manipulation faster, guard their vitality more strategically, and establish richer connections with reliable people. Because sensitivity, when properly guided with emotional precision, there's another dimension of sensitive capacity that rarely gets discussed. Sensitive people frequently become exceptional communicators. Why? Because people feel profoundly understood around them. And humans are naturally attracted to emotional safety. Psychology deuces stress acknowledged when people feel witnessed, acknowledged. When people feel witnessed, acknowledged, and deeply recognized, their physical bodies increases. Emotional availability increases naturally. recovery, observation, psychological separation, emotional regulation. And the responsiveness that once produced suffering becomes sharpened perception instead. That's when the sensitive person endure through emotional blindness in others mins. Be called emotional blindness in others. But emotionally intelligent, sensitive people eventually penetrate cack slicing, hidden slighting, gaslighting, hidden hostility, emotional incongruence, fabricated vulnerability, control masked as tenderness. And once perceived, manipulation loses effectiveness, frequently intimidate toxic people effortlessly. Their awareness exposes emotional dishonesty naturally. And possibly the most meaningful insight of all exists here. Sensitive people aren't fragile because they feel completely. Most humans escape emotional depth because it requires tremendous courage. Sensitive people inhabit emotional depth continuously. The challenge becomes learning not to suffocate there, and once they achieve that equilibrium, be clarity. Their emotional awareness transforms into clarity. Their instinct transforms into navigation. Their compassion transforms into actual power instead of self-dissolution. And the identical person who once felt overwhelmed by everything develops capacity to comprehend human behavior with stunning accuracy. Isn't softness, it's sophisticated awareness. And in a world where most people barely understand themselves, the capacity to genuinely comprehend human emotion becomes among the rarest and most powerful capabilities anyone can develop. That's the overlooked reality about genuine sensitive people. Their capacity was never designed to break them.